through being coached. And I think what moms need to know is, Mom, you're the best coach for your kid just by virtue of fact that God gave you them as a kid. You don't need to go outsource the coaching to all of these other people that you think are experts. God gave you this kid, like, you're the best coach. Now start showing up like one.
All right, what's going on, listeners of the Better Than Rich show? You are going to love this next guest, Alyce Dailey. She's the author, coach, speaker, entrepreneur behind the Magic Mom movement, and she is just simply amazing. Mike and I got into a wide-ranging discussion with her about how she's raising, 4 entrepreneurially minded daughters, the difference between, men and women, and how we approach parenting, but also how we approach self-care and all of the different things like mom guilt. I think it was the best definition of mom guilt I ever got. Mike, what are some of the things that you really enjoyed about the convo? I'm curious.
I love the deeper questions that you asked and that I asked about, like, how to fully live versus, we would die for a child, but how can we fully live? What does it mean to express, be happy and model that for our kids? And I love that she was willing to play full out with a question about the feminist movement and like what that means as being empowering females and women's and all people of all races, colors, genders, and everything in between during this, societal, I would say crazy times that we're in right now. I loved her definition on that. So great conversation. I loved it.
Absolutely. So listener, you are in for a treat. Without further ado, let's get on with the show and enjoy our conversation with Alyce Dailey.
So welcome back to the Better Than Rich show. I'm here with Andrew Biggs. My name is Mike Abramowitz, and we have an unbelievable guest today. For those of you guys on YouTube, the Magic Mom, Alyce Dailey. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Better Than Rich. How are you today?
I'm so amazing. A little under the weather, but I was just so looking forward to doing this, getting up this morning. I couldn't wait.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. And I'm fired up that I got my book on Amazon and it just got delivered, and it has the official bestseller Wall Street Journal label on there.
So cool.
Your husband Seth told me I got the one of the first with the labels.
You did.
So congratulations. Wall Street Journal bestseller is a big that's a huge accomplishment. I want to hear about the journey of how you got there and all. But I devoured the first 50 pages last night. I was telling you before we started the show, I loved it. And here's what I want to start is I'm a 7-time firewalker with Tony Robbins. And when I read in your book that you had a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I read the story of like the crew took one of your daughters and behind the scenes to kind of work with her a little bit. And I was like, we're best friends. I haven't even met you yet, but like I was fired up about that. And I just want to hear from your lens, just digging right in to how did you get introduced to Tony? How did you get to introduce to the Firewalk? Why was it something that you're like, all right, I got to have my daughters do this in their early teens, early adolescence, because that is abnormal. For that community, and for a parent to say, yeah, let's have my kid walk across burning hot coals that's like 1400 degrees. I want to start there just to give us a little context, because that was awesome when I read that.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I had no idea we were going here first, and I love it. So my first introduction to Tony was actually when I was in high school, and my mom would fall asleep watching the infomercials. And it was back when Tony would dress in the suits. And he looked so uncomfortable. And you're like, who is this guy talking about unlimited power or whatever he was talking about then? And she bought like the tapes. And so she would have all these tapes. And I actually don't remember listening to them, but I remember listening to the infomercials. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I kind of socked it away, didn't think much of it. And I remember when Seth and I got married, he was working an internship as an assistant manager at Walgreens. And I think it was an internship in college or something. And somebody burned him a copy of Jim Rohn CDs, and he would start listening to these Jim Rohn CDs. So that's kind of how we got into this personal growth world. Nice. And so fast forward, we get into real estate. Tony Robbins comes back again. We're like, oh, I'm like, this is the same dude from the infomercials. And so Seth went first to a UPW, Unleash the Power Within event. He's like, Alyce, this is really amazing. You need to go. He took me, I did the fire walk, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is really amazing. Like, how do we introduce our kids to this? And so we started talking about it as a family, and our 14-year-old, we're like, would you want to go? She was a freshman at high school at the time. We're like, would you want to go? And she's like, yeah. And everybody says yeah until they get there the first day and they realize like, oh, you do it on the first day, not the fourth. Because everybody thinks like, oh, like you work your way up to it. But the reality is you get it out of the way right at the beginning. And the theory that Seth and I have behind it was, if you can be that age and walk on fire, what possibly could you not do the rest of your life? So we wanted to cut through a bunch of limiting beliefs early, because we spend a lot of time right now rewiring our brains from all this stuff from when we were kids. And what if we just wired them the right way from the get-go instead of having to rewire it later, because they just don't have as much baggage. So she did it at 14. The second daughter did it at 13. Third daughter did it, I think, at 12, or she was still younger than the other one because she's got like bragging rights. And then the fourth one is 10 and she's waiting. She's like, when's my turn?
Before I get Biggs, I could kick it to you, but I just want to say I absolutely love that. Because, 14, the 14-year-old is now 18, right?
Yeah, she just turned 19. Yep.
So 19. So I mean, this is, a few years removed now. And that's where my curiosity stemmed, which is like, and maybe you go through it in the book, but I'm like, wow, she walked across fire at 14. I did my first fire walk when I was in my like late 20s. And to your point, a lot of that trauma that I was walking across the fire was from like my 14-year-old self, and like that chapter of life. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect opportunity for me to get into the mind of the mom who, sent the 14-year-old kid who now has a 19-year-old. Like, what foundation was laid there? Like, is there something that you've noticed as that being foundation, or was it like not that foundational? Because I'm sure there's tons of stacking and like what the symbolic reference of that is. Because I have it on my dreams list to take my son on a fire walk when he's in like his teens. So.
And I'll give you this one caveat. I'm always careful to say, like, when we talk about fire walks and all these things that our kids have done, the one rule that Seth and I like put in place between the two of us is that we're not going to send our kids to do something that we haven't done first. We're going to model it, right? Because this isn't about fixing them or, hey, you just go be better. They need to see us doing it first, and then us do it with them. And then they're going to go out and do it on their own. So to any parent that's like, oh, that sounds really great, I'll send them to UPW, or I'll send them to this thing. Time out. Let's take a look in the mirror first and say, hey, where do we, where do I as mom, where do they need to see me showing up? Because they're too busy watching us. They don't want to hear what we have to say.
That's awesome. I mean, it's super inspiring. And I love the idea of, wouldn't it be great if we just didn't mess our kids up as much as we got messed up, and then we don't have as much work to do later? And I'm sure that the Magic Mom, book highlights a lot of these things. I'm curious, what kind of, go back to the origins of this book. Like, what inspired you to want to write this, to try to, spread the word that you are up to? What would you say there?
So back in 2002 or so, we were lucky enough to see Jim Rohn speak live, one of his last live events before he passed. And he had us do these bucket list exercises. And one of the things that would constantly show up on my bucket list was, well, I'm going to write a book. I had no idea what I wanted to write a book on, but I knew that I wanted to become the kind of person that would have something to write about. And so I, socked it away, and I was like, I don't know what I'll write about. I don't know what I'll write about. And, fast forward to year, 15, 16 of selling real estate, I'm starting to feel burned out. And so I create some margin in my life of, okay, what's next? What do I want to, what am I here for? What's my purpose? What's the bigger, what's Alyce Dailey about in a bigger sort of way? Because I knew there was something next. I just didn't know what it was. And so I would, whenever you feel stuck, we feel stuck because we're either not growing or we're not in motion. So I'm like, okay, what does that look like to be in motion? Listen to podcasts, read some books, have more conversations with people. And it was through that process that I started to dig into the question of, Alyce, what is the one question that people ask you so many times that you don't even think about it because it's just a natural response that you give, that it's so subconscious. You're in this unconscious competence in it. You don't even know that it's happening. And I was like, oh, well, that's easy. Because every time I go teach, speak, travel, the question that we get asked is, how did you raise 4 daughters that are so curious and kind and adventurous and entrepreneurial in nature? Like, oh, I could talk about that all day long. So why don't I write about that? And so that's where the book was actually born, was out of answering the question that I got asked the most. And that's the question I would pose to the listeners today is, what do people ask you so often? You know, they just come to you for the answer, but it's so unconscious that you don't even know that you're spitting out an answer. Because that's where, for all of us, I think that's where our genius lies.
And I want to make sure I double click on this, because you said entrepreneurial in nature. And I love the way you described that in the book, where you said entrepreneurial is simply taking initiatives and taking risks, or having initiatives, taking risks. And I like that you kind of describe it that way, because many people, when they hear entrepreneurial, they're like starting a business, lemonade stand for a kid or something like that. But you're like, let's really break it down what it means. It's like having initiative, taking risks. That doesn't have to necessarily only be business. And I really like that. Can you just speak to how that's shown up in the parenting of these young ladies as you're raising them, where it was like the definition of entrepreneurial, and how they were able to not just say, okay, let me run a business or do a startup or something?
Well, it even started as, as owning our own business, seeing like, I want to hire people that have an entrepreneurial spirit. They might not be going out and starting their own business, but they're really building within our business, right? So I want to hire an entrepreneur, somebody that's going to come within and build and take initiative and take risk within this structure. So they don't own their own business, yet they are creating and taking ownership within. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe this definition is much broader than what we've kind of tried to put this peg in the square hole, right? And I started to look at motherhood. I don't know anything that is more entrepreneurial than having children. I mean, talk about initiative and risk and not knowing what the heck you're doing. Like, that is, to me, I look at every mother as an entrepreneur, because whether or not you consider your household a business, it kind of is. Everything that you do running it day to day is the same as you're taking initiatives, you're taking risks every single day. Raising children is like that. So we wanted to instill in our kids this idea of you can go be whoever you want, but it's not going to come without those traits of initiative and risk. So this isn't about them starting the next Google or building the next whatever, but it is about wherever you are. These are skill sets that we want you to have. And it's gonna entail some failure as a part of it. We want our home to be a safe place for them to fail. We don't want the first time that they experience failure to be when they leave. We want to be able to celebrate failure with them here and debrief it with them and process through it with them in a safe environment, so that when they're not here, they're like, oh, I've been here before. I know what this is like. I can do this again. Because if I did it before, I can do it again.
Well, it's super, super inspiring, Alyce. I mean, I think this is really hitting on just how to be a great parent, how to be a great entrepreneur, and also how to do both simultaneously, which is really, really hard, at least in my experience and from a lot of people that we've had on the podcast and we've chatted with. Help me understand, when you look at some of the biggest challenges, especially for moms, right? We're over here as 2 dads, so we have one perspective. But from the mom's lens, what are the biggest challenges you think that moms are facing, in trying to raise, competent, polite, courteous, but also curious and adventurous kids the way that you have? What are some of the biggest challenges that you think moms are facing right now that you see?
Guilt. Guilt when they're working outside of the home, guilt when they're home, guilt when they choose to put their kids in sports, guilt when they don't put them in sports, guilt when they run through the fast food drive-through line, guilt that they didn't do the organic meal. So there's a lack of definition around what success means, because there's always going to be somebody that did something better in a certain area, and we're picking the best of all of those pieces and continually just feeling bad because there's nobody around us to tell us, like, hey, you're winning. because nobody set up that definition. And that definition for me looks different from another mom. And so even to have conversation with moms, where do moms go to have those conversations? I mean, if it's not a mom that you're running into at drop off, at preschool or in the carpool line or at a sports thing, I don't think moms have very much community. So I think there's a support piece for moms that's missing that continues to feed the guilt.
Absolutely.
I'm curious on this, and sorry to interrupt here, because you really struck a chord with me, because a lot of times men want to solve the problem. And if the problem is mom guilt and men want to come in and try to solve a problem, it's obviously going to create some tension, because I'm assuming mom guilt is not a problem that a man can solve. Is that a valid assumption?
I don't think single-handedly, but I think that they can be incredibly supportive.
So talk about that, please.
Yeah. So one, I think listening and understanding that the guilt is there, not trying to fix the guilt. Oh, well, what? You don't need to feel guilty because she's doing that. Like, but you're doing such a good job. But no. Just listen. Just listen.
I've never said that one.
I was like, I think I might have said that last night. No. Yeah. Our son just turned 1, and the party wasn't big enough. Like that kind of. It's like, oh man, yeah.
Oh
I'm with you.
Social media to make you feel bad. Oh my gosh, like hello.
Yeah.
First, just listen.
Yeah, keep going. Keep ramping on this. I'm taking notes.
Just one, empathizing, even if you don't understand fully. Like the feeling of guilt is real, because there is all of this comparison going on that you don't necessarily see. Because when we're home and we have a couple minutes, we might be scrolling on social media and we saw that so-and-so just threw the birthday party and it was 10 times as amazing and so many people and the food looked better and all of these sort of things, right? So you don't know what other voices are already coming in that have contributed to that. So for you to come in, it's belittling of the emotions that are going on. So even to ask, hey, what emotions are you feeling around that? Help me what does that mean to you? How can I support you? Hey, have you had any time to yourself lately? How can I support you refueling? Because I think a lot of moms don't even know how to refuel. They don't know what fuels them, or if it's not a need, it doesn't happen. So
what are some examples of refueling for moms that you've worked with?
I think it can vary, but I think for a lot of them, it's just, we make the jokes about the only time a mom gets to herself is when she's, sitting on the potty or in her car in the driveway. And even then, like, I remember times where my kids would run out the driveway because they hear the car coming, or they open the door when I'm in the bathroom. Like, you don't even get those times. So, okay, like, what would you taking some time for you just to go get a cup of coffee and a journal and you go? Or is it that you want to stay home and we all leave, right? Like, what would be more fun for you? Or we plan play dates for our kids. Plan a play date for your wife. Set up for her to go to lunch with girlfriends, right? Call the other guys and say, hey, let's get all of our wives to go to lunch together and we're going to take care of the kids and not complain about it. Or not complain about, oh my gosh, it was so hard and he was so this and the kids were so this. Just do it and don't, because that's what she deals with all day, every day. And you get a mom who's also working outside of the home, and there's a whole other layer of things, because she's probably working because it's something that she really wants to do and she feels passion towards. And then there's guilt around, well, should I be doing this? Right? Because I remember when I worked and I was breaking even, it wasn't like we were making money from me going to work, but I did it because I loved it. So the guilt that I felt, like, should I just stay home? Because now I'm paying a sitter basically what I'm making. Mm-hmm. So helping her to find success for her in that season. So Carl Jung has a quote, it's actually in the front of my book. I loved it so much. It was part of the epigraph. The greatest burden on a child is the unlived life of a parent. And I think every mom would say, when asked, what do you want for your child? I want my child to be happy. I think we'd all say that. So the question that I ask moms is, when you look at your mom, would you describe your mom as someone who was happy? And the number of times that I just get this like blank stare look of like, no, my mom wasn't happy. My mom was a martyr. My mom just did all the things that needed to be done to keep everything together. Okay, well, that was what was modeled for you. Would your kids describe you as happy? Would your husband describe you as happy? Are you modeling happiness? Because if we're not modeling it, it doesn't matter what we tell them to do. Why, kids, I just want you to be happy. I'm miserable as heck, but I want you to be happy. It doesn't work. So what does it mean for mom? What does it mean for mom to live a fully lived life? Let's answer that question for mom. Because most of them haven't gone there. Because they're like, I'm living in the world of shoulds. I should do this, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this. And by the time those shoulds, like the shoulds are still like, there's still a whole list of shoulds. I haven't even gotten through my shoulds yet. So I'm not going to get to living a fully lived life.
Right. And that kind of ties into this, MAGIC as an acronym, right? So I believe M is for model. And then you also have an acronym for, AGIC. Walk us through that a little bit.
Affirm, grace, inquire, coach, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
yep.
Perfect. So walk us through each of these. Like why are each of these, these 5 pillars of, creating mom magic important to the mom? What would you say there?
Yeah. And so it's funny because I wrote the book, 5 principles to unlock your natural gifts to raise entrepreneurial daughters, just because the stories in the book are girl stories, because I have 4 daughters. And yet what I love about principles is that they're just that, they're principles, whether it's a girl, a boy, a mom or dad, an 80-year-old, an 8-year-old, they all apply. So I looked at what are the things that we've done in our home that have made a difference. This isn't the kind of book you pick up and you're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, if I do these steps, I'm going to be a great parent. It's a book about how do we open up a conversation around how we can parent intentionally. So modeling, right? Like that's what we've been talking about. What do I want to model for my kids? I want them to be happy. Am I modeling being happy? What are the other things that I want my kids to be? And how am I modeling those things today? Am I the kind of adult that I want my child to be? A is for affirm. There's so many ways to see affirmations. There's the traditional sense of, I am smart, I'm kind, I'm good, I'm loved. Like those words that we use that are really important. Where are the other places that are having an effect via affirmation? It could be the music that we're listening to. What about the people that we're hanging out with? Right? Those are all affirmations all day, every day. And those are really loud. Those are really loud things. The music, the friends. And how about the voice that's in our own head? How are we consciously training our own thoughts, our own voice, and teaching our kids about how to manage what's going on for them? Because I was a communications major in college, but like nobody taught me how to talk to myself. That would have been a really valuable class, right? Like it's not a subject that we cover. G is grace. And that's what we were talking about with like self-care, self-compassion. Like what does mom need to refuel? Because I think there are a lot of things that we consider luxuries as moms that are actually maintenance, because we'll take our car to get the oil changed when the little red light comes on, or hopefully sooner. But definitely when the red light comes on, it's like, oh, got to get the oil changed. So we go take it in to get changed. Yet moms look at things like, well, I want to get a massage or go to the chiropractor or get my hair done or get my nails done. And we see those things as luxuries, or taking vitamins, or, getting the green juice or the organic food or whatever it is for you. But I'm like, what if we have it all wrong? What if those are just maintenance items? That's not a luxury. Like we need those things to like keep ourselves fueled, to keep going, because we run ourselves so hard. So what does grace look like in that? And what we were talking about earlier, like as husbands, as partners, how can you support the women to go do those things and not make her feel bad for it? Right? Yeah, those things cost money and they're worth it. They're maintenance things. We do those maintenance things to our house all the time. And you do it because it has to be done. Our compressor on our freezer just went out in our kitchen. It's like, okay, well, we're gonna get that fixed. It's a maintenance item. You don't think about it, you just make it happen. So what would it look like to put a spa day in her calendar once every 6 weeks? just as a, hey, you're worth it. Because a lot of times I think there's a self-worth issue attached to like, yeah, but I could use that money for Johnny to go to summer camp. I could use that money for this over here. I could, yeah. And what if we made that a line item in our family budget to take care of mom because mom's worth taking care of? And that dad elevates that in the home. The I is for inquire. We change the future by the questions that we ask. We don't need to know the answers. We just need to start asking different questions. What happens when we start getting curious with our kids instead of going into judgment so quickly? 9 out of 10 times, I think I know the answer of something my kid's going through, and I'm tempted to want to give it. And I have trained myself to ask 3 questions before I even go there. And when I ask the questions, I actually find out, dang, they're way smarter than I thought they were, than I gave them credit for, regardless of age, right? I'm like, and 2, I love learning how they think, like seeing their wheels turn and seeing how they process, because if I can influence how they think, not what they think, I'm going to feel way more confident about releasing them out into the world. So asking different questions. And then C is for coach. And I actually talk about the distinction in the book between a coach, a consultant, and a mentor, because I think we collapse all of those and sometimes use those interchangeably, where a mentor is somebody that comes into your life, maybe has done something that you want to do, and it's like, hey, here's my experience. Hope it's helpful. Good luck. A consultant is somebody that you would bring in to say, hey, like, look at the issues, give me the strategies. What are the problems that you see? And they say, hey, here's some options. Good luck. A coach is the only one that actually has a vested interest in how the outcome of the game works. Like, they want to win the game. They are vested in that. And as a mom, as a parent, I think we get to be coach from 0 to 18. Once they leave the house, if we've done our job well, they will come back to us as a consultant. They will come back to us for mentorship. But we have to earn the opportunity for those things to happen through being coach. And I think what moms need to know is, Mom, you're the best coach for your kid just by virtue of fact that God gave you them as a kid. You don't need to go outsource the coaching to all of these other people that you think are experts. Like, God gave you this kid, like, you're the best coach. Now start showing up like one.
This is so good. I'm loving every second of this. I'm taking so many notes. I can't wait to introduce my wife to this episode, Alyce. So thank you so much. I'll have to think of a way to do it in a way that's not like patronizing, like, you need to listen to this. So I'll think of that. But I mean, just all the things you're talking about. Am I the adult that I want my kids to become, right? Like, really modeling that, looking at this idea of maintenance versus luxury, and understanding, like, no, like, when you take care of yourself, that's not something that's optional, right? Just like getting the oil changed on a car. And then really looking at, we change the future by the questions we ask. I mean, there's so much good stuff that you said there. So listener, if you need to go back and listen to that, make sure you do, because Alyce just dropped some really great stuff there. Mike, I'm curious what's coming up for you so far. What questions do you have?
Yeah, I have a deeper question that I wanted your take on. As you were talking, I'm like, this is, to Andrew's point, is beautiful, because you created a framework, something that's simple to follow or to model. So I appreciate that. Where my curiosity went is, you hear women say that it's like a male dominant industry, male dominant world. You hear sometimes women say that, especially, again, we're kind of going down a little rabbit hole here. I would say I identify as a feminist, to the real root of what the word means. But then there's a whole movement that kind of doesn't really align too much with the actual definition of what the word means. So I'm very interested in your take. I'm interested at what the conversation and table topics are with your 4 daughters underneath this umbrella, and what are the conversations around this paradigm that is like around in our society right now. So I'd love to hear from you on this. I hope you're cool with just speaking open and honest and speaking everything that you can around this topic, because I'm probably going to have a few follow-ups and more curiosities around it.
It's a great question.
Yeah. So just to give some context around the ages of the girls, they're 19, 17, 13, 10. And I tell you, having adult children is so fun. Like, I've just had the best time. Our oldest daughter has moved out. She's living in Tulsa and working. And our 17-year-old graduates from high school this year. And they are both incredibly independent and yet value our family and our relationship so highly. I know when my oldest is off of work, because she, like, my phone rings at like 5:04 when she's driving home. And I love that we can have these sorts of conversations about real stuff going on in the world and stuff going on in the news and stuff that they're hearing generationally from their friends of like, hey, I don't know what to do with this, right? Like, what do you do with the feminist movement? What do you do with, all the gender stuff that's coming out? Like, how do you navigate that? And I think one is, in your household, have you made it a place where these conversations are okay and they're not going to feel judged for even having the conversation? Because there have been times where they have come from school and they've said something that might be a little controversial, or like, well, crap, I didn't have to deal with that when I was a kid, right? And internally, there's this war going on of like wanting to shut it down, or like, oh, that's not the way it should be, or that's not the way it is, and to get out of judgment and lean back into the curiosity, right? Go back into how they're thinking. We have set up a framework in our house of, you know what, there's a whole lot of noise going on in the world. Instead of like listening to the noise and being responsive to the noise, how do we want to be and how do we want to show up in the world? There's a common sentiment that's been around for a little bit of like, for women, like finding their seat at the table, like, making room, and like, I want a seat at the table. And there was something about it that I was like, well, yes, but I kind of resisted it a little bit and I couldn't quite figure it out until I finished the book. It was one of the last things that I wrote in the book. And at the end, I wrote a letter to my daughters. And it was just bullet points of things that I'm like, if something happened and I was gone tomorrow, what are the things that I would want to leave them with? And one of the things that I left them with was, be a table builder. Don't worry about finding a seat at a table. Just go build more tables, because there are people looking for friends. There are people looking for a seat. Go build some more tables and invite people to come sit with you. And when that table's full, go build another one and go teach other women how to go build tables. Because I think for too long, women have been against each other. Like, we haven't needed anybody else to make our lives miserable because we've done a really good job on our own. And so as a family of primarily females, it's like, how do we want to be in the world? How do we want to show up differently? And the way that we've modeled, one of the ways that we've modeled this in our home is we have people over our house all the time. I host these girls' night out events, and I just invite women to come. And they're like, what is it? I'm like, well, just come once. I can't really explain it, but I promise you'll leave with a new friend. And I start with the C.S. Lewis quote, which is also in the book. That's one of my favorites. Friendship begins at the moment when someone says, you too, I thought I was the only one. So when, as women, we can get to this place of just being vulnerable and saying what's really there for us instead of hiding behind some of these hard shells and like fighting and going against, I want to look at, as a family, as a female, as a mom, what can I be for instead of being against something? Because I think it's a lot easier to get people to come with you when you're for something that you can believe in.
That was a great answer. And I appreciate you asking, or I appreciate you answering and allowing me to ask. And I do have a couple follow-ups. I'll kick it to Biggs, but I just wanted to say that the reason why I asked that question is because just the context. I had a young lady, I don't know, probably going back several years at this point, and she outed herself, and she was saying, you're a privileged white male in this society, and you're the problem with me not being able to have equal rights, and just like kind of like a bashing session on me. And I'm like, what the hell? Where's it? Like, you were like, I was a great mentor for you. Like like a couple of years ago, you were having like suicidal thoughts and called me as the first person before you even called your parents. And I was like there, and now I'm the problem. Like, what happened? where did this tide turn? And I was almost speechless in the moment, where it's like I didn't even know what to say or how to process being accused of something that I felt innocent to. And I think that there's some men, I can't speak on behalf of all men, and I think there's some people in general who feel like they're being pointed fingers to and fingers at for something that we didn't even know that existed, or that we're almost like innocent to, and raising some sort of awareness around this, that in a healthy dialogue with someone who's doing so well and has such a beautiful movement and awesome insights, to have a real conversation around this. I felt like it was too much of an important topic for me not to go deep on. And I didn't know we were going to go there until we started talking, but I really appreciate you expressing what you did. And I'd like to see if there's more. If you have anything else to say to that.
Oh my gosh, we could go 3 days on this. I mean, because for those of you that aren't watching,
go on.
For those that aren't seeing visually, I'm Asian Indian. I'm first generation American. My parents came here from India. I'm married to the whitest white guy from Montana, and our 4 girls are just this beautiful shade of mocha that you can imagine. Everybody looks at them and is like, they'll travel places and be like, what nationality are you? And because nobody can ever guess. And you should interview them on a podcast sometime, is what it's like to be that generation, right? Of still having to check a box of which race are you? And you can pick one still in 2022, right? 2023. It's like, really? We're still picking one. And yeah, so my husband's had times where he's been accused of being racist at work. And it's like, have you seen a family picture? Right? One of my goals as a mom is to raise empowered women. And to be an empowered individual, that there's nothing on anybody else in that. That is 100% on me to be an empowered person. You can't take away my power. I can only give it away. I think there's something right now in culture, society, where it's cool to be a victim. It's cool to cancel people. It's cool to, make people pay for something forever without any sort of grace. And that just feels so, oh my gosh, the world just needs a little bit more kindness, right? Like, which one of us is without sin? Throw the first stone. And yet we're watching people throw stones all day. So I don't want white people to feel bad for being white. I don't want Black people to feel bad for being Black. I want them all. I want every person, male, female, whatever color, to be empowered as who you are as a person. And I'm not going to make excuses for that. I'm not going to blame anybody for that. As long as I blame somebody, I'm giving away my power. And I refuse to do that. And I refuse to have kids that think that somebody else is responsible for their happiness or for things that they have. When you look at, the words, we were promised the pursuit of happiness, not happiness all the time. But how lucky are we to live in a place where we can pursue happiness anytime, any day that we choose?
This is so good. And I loved your frame around this, Alyce, and thanks for, like Mike said, just being willing to take on any topic. And I think, especially to the parenting point, bringing this back to like raising children and being a mother, being a father, it's like, we are being forced to have conversations that, again, certainly I never felt like I was exposed to many of these conversations as a kid. And I love the idea of your household being a place where anything's up for discussion, right? Especially as the kids get older, it's like anything's on the table. And it's just also, it's like, where is the primary influence for your children? Is it with the parents? Is it with the culture? Is it with their teacher, with their friends? And I mean, that's something I'm always paying attention to and striving for. It's like, okay, who's influencing my kid? And is anybody's voice louder than me right now? I mean, my kids are pretty young, so I have a little bit easier job right now. But I mean, I mean, it's 19, 17, 13, 10, they get their phones now, they get that, they get to drive, they're going off to school, college, like there's all sorts of influences that are going to be there. But the fact that she's calling you at 5:04 tells me you're the one she wants to talk to most. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a really empowering and inspiring thing. One of the things you said about friendship, you were talking about this idea, you two, I thought I was the only one. You mentioned earlier, moms don't have a support group. And it's funny because we're over here as dads, we're like, dads don't have a support group. We had to go find it. And it's like, it's funny. I mean, maybe no one has a support group. I don't know. But it's like, what do you think how can moms find support, And to your other point around competition and, kind of even being judgmental to each other and tearing each other down from time to time, that you see, women, and everyone does it, but you see sometimes reputation attacks and character attacks more with women. I'm just curious, like, how can a mom really find her spot, find her niche, and find a community or support group that she needs? What would you say to that?
Yeah. So, even just to start with, why do we see that happen? Why do we see women tearing each other down? Well, it's because it was modeled for us. It's what we saw. We do what we see. We do what we've experienced. We do what we think is normal, right? Like, we think about habits that you have that if you really dig into why you have the habit, you're like, I don't know why I do it. Well, I bet if you dig a little bit, you'll find that either your mom or dad did it. And it was just so ingrained in you, you do it too. I mean, I start in the book talking about grocery bags. When Seth and I got married, I saved all of our plastic grocery bags, and I actually still do. And there's this cabinet, all the plastic bags go to die. And he's like, we don't need all these bags. I'm like, but you're not going to throw them away. Like, they stay there. And it wasn't until, we went to my mom's house, realized, oh, she's been doing this since I was born. Like, the bags come home and they go in. And so it was modeled, and subconsciously, well, that's what I do. Or maybe it's where you put the milk in the refrigerator. You've got the spot. It's in that spot. And you will like die on a hill for it, because that's how it was always been for you. It's not that you actually care. It's just what was modeled. So I think women have seen this fighting for so long that we're like, we just kind of think that's normal. And so I want to set, what does a new normal look like for us to be supportive of one another? In the entrepreneurial space, I see a lot of opportunities for the guys to get together, right? There's all kinds of networking groups and just all kinds of groups. Like, you name it, there's a group for the guys. And if a guy decides, like, my husband found something going on, he's like, oh, I'm going to go to this. It's really not that big of a deal for him to pick up and go. He doesn't have to think about the 4 kids and how they're going to get to school and making sure there's groceries and the house is clean and the dog's taken care of. He just goes. And I support him in his going. One, it's really hard for a woman, I think even an entrepreneurial woman, to find a space to go to. If she finds a space, it's usually with men, and a lot of times primarily men. Again, no judgment in that. It's just the way that it is. And a lot of time for women to leave the house, we feel like it's so much work to leave that we start thinking about it and we're tired, that we're just like, to heck with it. I'll either just watch it online or I won't go, or I'll get notes from somebody else. It's just not worth it, right? Because I've got to coordinate rides to school, from school, clothes, laundry, food, play dates, sports. Like, my mind's already like, I don't know how it's all going to get done. Forget it. I'm not going to go. And then there's just not a variety of places for us to choose from. So that was part of the book too. It was, I want to speak to entrepreneurial moms, whether that's you run a 6-7 figure business or you just run a high level household, right? And you're wanting to elevate who you're friends with. And so I've started to create the communities. So we've got the Magic Mom Experience. We've got the Magic Mom Community. I teach moms how to grow their business through growing community wherever they are, right? So how do we remain aligned as moms, true to our values, yet not sacrifice one for the other? How do we grow our family and how do we grow our business and have them be aligned? That's what I'm really passionate about.
So good. And yeah, I think it's everything you said there rings true, and it makes sense why it's hard for a mom to prioritize those things. And it's also just a reflection, for me as a husband to say, okay, how can I show up differently to encourage this more and also just support? It's like, yeah, it's not as easy to just book a flight and, hey, I'm headed out of town this weekend. It's the 16 to 20 other things that you listed there that have to get done before you can book that flight. So I love that. Mike, what's coming up for you?
I'm curious on, you have the little one. You said 10 years old.
10. Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to, I'm just going to ask the question. It's probably not the best. Hopefully you could decipher, but it's like, what have you learned from the first three that you feel like I kind of messed up on that a little bit, or I want to do a better job at that for the fourth one?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, are there some things that's like, all right, the oldest usually kind of is the experiment. And then the second one, it's like, all right, let's try to correct that a little bit. But by the time you get to 4, it's like, all right, we figured out a bunch of these mess ups. And sometimes maybe there's even an overcompensation that maybe take place. So I'm the youngest. So that's why I got I don't know. I feel like my parents were, by the time I came along, they were so tired. They're like, oh my God, another one. Like, just figure it out. Hopefully, so if you could just kind of speak to that, maybe just a little bit, if there's anything that shows up. I don't even know what the actual question is, but just something that you could speak to there.
Absolutely. I remember when I had I think it was my third, my mother-in-law sent me the book. I think it might just be called Birth Order. Like, the whole book's written on birth order. It's a very real thing, right? There is something to the order in which you are born and the different pieces and how they play out. And I think the number one thing is to have grace with yourself as a parent, to realize you're not the same parent with your first as you are with your fourth. We weren't making as much money, when we had our first. We weren't living in the same place. My time schedule was way different. My mindset was different. So I wasn't the same person. The same mom that raised Carissa, that birthed her, is not the same mom that birthed Brielle. So just having grace for you had a different mom. You had a different dad. And coming from that place, that relieves so much of the pressure, because it's not that you got it right or got it wrong. It's you got it right in that season. I made the best decisions I knew how to make as a 25-year-old Alyce with my firstborn. And I'm making the best decisions now as a 45-year-old with a 10-year-old. And it shows up very differently. Yeah. Dude, is my fourthborn listening to music that I never would have let my firstborn listen to? 100%. Because she's in the car with the other 3. Like, let's talk about the practicality of no, you're only going to listen to Kids Bop. Like, that's not fair to the other kids, right? Like, so there's compensations that you have to make because of now the new information that didn't exist when there was only one and you could just watch Baby Einstein and play classical music and, put him to bed at 6:30 and it was lovely, So I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just with having that grace for yourself to realize you're not the same person and the circumstances are entirely different. So yeah, you're going to be a different parent. My fourth one is going to get a cell phone probably when she turns 11, where my first one probably didn't get it till she was 15 or 16. And yes, there are pros and cons to being any one of those ages, and we have conversations about it. So I think that's the important part, is to talk about, yeah, you're the firstborn, and that really stinks. And let's look at all the good things that came with you being first that your fourth will never get. All of the field trips I went on with my firstborn. By the time I got to my second and my third, I'm like, I do not want to go to that Renaissance Festival again. I have been there. I'm not going. Go with your friends. I'm done. Right? Like, I'm not going. So she doesn't get those experiences. Like, let's make a list of all of the things the fourth doesn't get because the first got it.
I like that response a lot. And specifically the lens of, I'm not the same person I was when I was raising the first one as I am raising the fourth, because that I never heard that before. It's usually about the kid. It's rarely about the parent. It's like, you're supposed to be the best always. You're always supposed to have your shit figured out, no matter how old you are. But I really like that frame of like 25-year-old Alyce is different than 45-year-old Alyce, and therefore you're getting a different experience because you're getting a different version of me. But I'm doing my best that I know how to do. At 25, I'm doing the best I know how to do at 45. So it's a really beautiful response. And listener, I hope you caught that, because ultimately we're continuing to evolve as humans, and we're all having a human experience. And as we're continuing to evolve, we're going to bring our best to what's present to us in this moment. So with that also being said, that's why the youngest is probably the best, because we're getting the best version of you. No, I'm just kidding.
You would agree. 100% you would agree.
Andrew's a middle child, so
that's right.
He's screwed.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, you're the
Stuck
fun
between
one.
the two
Middles are
worlds.
the fun ones. They're the party ones.
We're trouble. We're trouble for sure. I want to hit on a couple more things. I know we joked about going for 3 days. I think we probably could, Alyce, but you're a busy woman. We want to let you go at some point here today. One other thing that I really was kind of touched me was some of your catchphrases and things that you like to say, was the idea of being busy so you don't have to feel. I would love to hear you kind of talk about that a little bit. I think that's very common for a lot of people in general, listeners to this podcast, but again, especially to the moms out there. And then, you'd be willing to die for your child, but would you be willing to fully live for your child as well? Could you speak to those two things real quick and help the listener really understand what that means?
Yeah. So busy is a way that we behave so we don't have to feel, is what I write about. And in 2018, after building a really successful real estate business, on the outside, we had everything you could imagine. We had a nice house and cars and vacations and all the things, like no reason to ever complain about anything. And yet inside, I was just feeling so empty and so just down, probably depressed, just, and I felt trapped. I felt like the business that I built to help make us free was actually a noose, is what it felt like. And I realized the busier I became in business, the more I actually got rewarded for it. And I'm like, well, that's a trap. But we don't see busy as a drug. We don't put it on the same plane as alcoholism or shopping or drugs, or we don't put it on the same level, because busy gets accolades, it gets awards, it gets medals, it gets trophies, it gets all of these things. And I had a stage of, it's a whole other story, I had a stage of burnout. And I realized there's a whole bunch of things I wasn't allowing myself to feel. And busy was a way to just prevent myself from actually going there to like, Alyce, how do you actually feel about this? And I was scared to look in the mirror of what I would find, because sometimes it doesn't lead to great places or things that it's like, am I really willing to go there? Because in 2018, Seth asked me point blank, he's like, are you sick of the business? Are you sick of Baltimore? Are you sick of the marriage? And my answer was yes. I had put all of it on the table because I was so crispy. I was so burnt. I was so exhausted. And me choosing to go down and be with those feelings, it's a process. It's not, because we, as entrepreneurs, we want the 1, 2, 3 step. How do I get out of this? I even said that to a counselor once, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's not exactly how this works. You didn't get here overnight. This is not, going to be an overnight thing. Are you really willing to go there?" And she's like, "Because she said this really interesting thing. She's like, because you don't have to, right? It's a choice to go into those feelings. But she's like, if you're going to choose to go there, it's going to be hard work. Are you wanting to do it?" And she's like, there was no judgment as to whether I did or didn't. But I'm like, I've got to believe that the life on the other side of me being true and honest with how I'm feeling with myself is going to be better. And that's what I clung to. It almost cost us our family. It cost us relationships. It cost us a lot of things. And I can tell you now, having part of that whole experience took us from moving from Baltimore to Austin, which for a residential real estate agent is not something that is typically done, right? But as we were, how do we live this life that we want to design, the perfect life for us? It included moving to Austin. So we're like, okay, we're going to figure this out. And if you ask any one of the 6 of us right now, I guarantee you, ask us independently, every one of us would say we wish we had done it sooner. But it was the mom's got to take care of mom to open up all of these possibilities. Me continuing to push and strive because I'm doing it for everybody else actually wasn't the best path forward. Me being honest and true with what was good for mom actually was good for the family. But you can't always see it in the moment. So that's the busy piece. And that also leads right into the, what was the second one? Was that the
being willing to fully live for your child, not just die for them? Yeah, absolutely.
Before you go into that, I just want to make sure that the listener caught what you're talking about here, as far as like ever feeling like stuck or feeling like you're in the stage of burnout. You're this feeling where like there's no other option, like feeling like I just want to surrender to the world. And especially if you run a business, I mean, like, you know, the business could sometimes be the escape from reality, but then we just bury ourselves in our work to escape these feelings. And I really love your response there, because then you said, well, I have a choice. I have a choice where I could escape this or I could choose to stay. And it kind of ties into a lot of, we just ran a full mini course on this. We have a full program called Operator to Owner for that reason, is to help people free themselves from their business. And frankly, it's not from your lens of what you just said. It's like, yes, it's a choice, but it's a choice to avoid consequence that's even more greater than the choice of experiencing the temporary pain of those feelings of change, because change is going to happen. But like, how do we navigate through those transitions with grace and with support and with help? So I love that you said that, because a lot of the listeners of the show are going through Operator to Owner with us to help them become a business owner, to free themselves up from the escape. So that way they could actually take the time to let the business run like a machine and actually go experience their feelings. And I just wanted to click on that. So thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. And sorry to interrupt. I know you're on the flow. So please go for the fully living.
So if we had stayed in Baltimore, what it would have shifted to is, I'm willing to die for my kids. It's really important that they stay here and finish school where they are. They're really comfortable. It would be selfish of me to want to make this move to Austin. So I'm going to sacrifice, because I'm the mom. I'm going to sacrifice, and I'm just going to stick it out, and I'm going to work really hard, and we're going to have money set aside for college, and I'm just going to power through. Versus, what does fully living mean for mom? Fully living for me was, you know what, we never wanted to live in Baltimore this long. We'd always had a plan to leave, and it had not materialized. And I realized that, if we don't just rip off the Band-Aid and do it now, I don't know, I don't want to wait 10 more years till the last one's gone and then make that move. So that's when we, as a family, started having the conversations. What if we move now? What would that mean? What could that look like? And it was a family decision. And it was a family decision with mom kind of leading the way, like this, we're doing this for mom. And Seth was very supportive. He was sure to let the kids know, like, hey, we're doing this for mom because mom's worth it. And this is something that she really wants. And I full well knew that we could make the move, get the apartment in Austin, and it might not work out, and we turn around and go back. But I was way more okay with that, saying, hey, we tried it for a year. It didn't quite work how we thought, but we tried it. That's fully living. And what happens if you give permission that it could be better than you ever thought? Right? We ended up renting the apartment. COVID happens. We end up buying our dream house out here. And we're like, dang, all 6 of us would say, wish we had done this sooner. So fully living actually allowed the family to fully live too. My sacrificing, thinking, well, I'm willing to sacrifice and die and be the martyr, actually wouldn't have been the best thing for them. So I really think the key is for mom to start tapping into what does it mean to fully live, because I think our kids are just desperate to see it.
I love it. And it's like reframing. I think so often what a mom is feeling, if I were to put my mom hat on for a second, and I could be totally wrong, but I think so often what's happening is what she's feeling is, this will be selfish if I do this. And so often it's literally the exact opposite.
Yes.
Right? Okay, cool. You confirmed. So I think that's correct. It's like oh, I can't go to the spa because that's selfish. And it's like, no, literally, we need you to go to the spa. Right?
We need you to go.
Yes.
Right. And that's what it'll start as. Like, this is where dad's role is really important. You're literally going to need to push her to go. Right. When she says like, hey, want to go to the Magic Mom experience? Like, yeah, you're going to need to push her to go because she's not going to naturally go. It's going to feel so awkward. Or I want to go have lunch with my girlfriends. Or you're going to have to make the suggestion because she's never going to say that that's what she wants. Or maybe she's into a sport, right? Like, what is there a sport or musical instrument that she's been into in the past that hasn't, been alive in this season of life? Because, hey, what would it be like for your kids to watch mom take up a new sport? Learn how to play tennis or golf or pickleball or whatever in this season of life. What is she now modeling for the kids? Like, you don't stop learning, you don't stop growing. In 2015, when I got invited to go climb Kilimanjaro with a group of women, the kids were like, well, we don't want you to go for 2 weeks, but you said yes, didn't you? Right? Because it was a big cost for them to have mom gone for 16 or 18 days. But they're like, but you have to say yes. You have to go do this. And so to have kids, to raise kids in such a way that they would push and say, hey, mom, we support you in this. You can do that in your home.
So inspiring.
Let's not miss this one. You freaking climbed to Mount Kilimanjaro.
that was like she's so impressive, Mike. She's like a throwaway. Yeah, when I climbed
just
Mount
like
Kilimanjaro.
a subtle. When I went to go climb one of the largest mountains in the world, I decided that I was going to be a great mom too. But
go big or go home, if you're going to do it.
Oh my God, that is Alyce. I've loved this. We ask every guest the same 3 questions towards the end of each of our episode, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about how people can stay in touch with you. But before we do that, question number 1 is, what do you think the world needs most today?
Curiosity and kindness. Getting out of judgment, going into curiosity and kindness.
Excellent. So the second question is, what 1 to 3 books besides The Magic Mom would you recommend everybody check out and read?
I have so many. Like, if you could see like the floor of my office right now, you would just laugh. Because there's so many in so many different arenas that I love. My 2 nerdy books are going to be Atomic Habits, because I think everything is built around habits. And it's an area that I'm always looking to just get better in. And then The Road Less Stupid, Keith Cunningham, I think is just brilliant. You could coach clients, you could coach a family, you could coach for years out of that one book. The questions in the book are just so inspiring. And then what would be third? I think one that I go back to a lot is Kelly Flanagan's Lovable. I think the world of Dr. Kelly, and I just think Lovable is one of those books that just brings us back to, you're worthy, you're loved. And that goes back to the curiosity and kindness, right? Like people just at the core just want to be seen and known and cared for and loved. And that's all part of what the world needs more of.
That's great. And listener, if you haven't listened to Dr. Kelly Flanagan's episode on the Better Than Rich show, go back and listen to that episode because it was fantastic, especially with the drawbridges and the thrones and the cannons about the ego, the false self. Oh, such a good episode. Yeah. Third question, Alyce, what does it mean to you to be better than rich?
My identity at the core is I'm a community builder. And I'm all about people and relationships. And to me, that's everything is community right where you are and building relationships, starting right at home, starting right in your house, starting with the people that are closest to you and just the foundations of those relationships and how you can take that and carry it into the world, to me is absolutely better than rich.
Amazing. I love that. So, I mean, this has been incredible, Alyce. Thank you so much for your time. Listener, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. I'm curious, how can people learn more? I mean, obviously you have the book, but you also have these events. Selfishly, I want to learn more about that so I can send my wife. Like, where can people learn more and stick in touch with you?
Yeah, so Instagram is great. Alyce Dailey on Instagram, alycedailey.com online. And yeah, we've got lots of things available in addition to the book. There's a course that's a self-study. There's a group coaching piece, but really the one that is closest, dearest to my heart is the community that's being formed in person, which is the Magic Mom Experience, which is geared towards entrepreneurial moms, and that could be, whether you're earning a whole bunch of money and building this business outside, or you are just really serious about building something within your household and leaving a legacy for your kids, and being that empowered mom, not willing to stay stuck, not willing to make excuses for why things are the way they are, or why they aren't the way that you think they should be. Because moms, you have so much power. You just need to not let it go so easily.
Alyce, thank you so much. And Alyce, your website is Alyce Dailey, ALYCE, Dailey, DAILEY.com. So listener, just so you know, that's the spelling. And thank you so much, Alyce. Thank you, Andrew. And as always, thank you, listener, for being here with us during this episode. And assuming this episode helped you, it's your turn. Help others. Share it with a friend, subscribe on YouTube, leave a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. And as always, remember, leave today better than you found it. Till next time, we'll see you then. Take care.